Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another breakfast with Blaha. And today I'm having fat-free Greek yogurt, almond butter, and milled flax seeds. All right, I want to chat with you guys a little bit today about upper back training. And it seems like a pretty simple concept when I talk about combining something like rows with rear delt flies. And when I say that, I'm not narrowing down specific exercises. And I want to be clear on that. I'm basically talking about any sort of rear delt exercise. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about dumbbells, whether they're standing ones, whether they're seated ones bent over, whether it's with cables, right? In theory, even machines. I've become increasingly stronger in the belief that for overall shoulder development, we probably don't need to focus on anything else for our shoulders really, other than rear delt type exercises. And the same thing with all of our middle and upper back. I think rowing should generally be where we focus. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong if you want to do some snatch grip high pulls. I like those. I program those for some of my lifters and athletes, but not necessarily for all of them. It depends on what they need to do. Because again, there's a pretty high fatigue to that. Depends on what our training volumes look like. If someone wants to do a few side laterals, lateral raise, sorry, everyone gets mad when you say side laterals. They're like, it's a redundant phrase. I'm kind of old school. I think people had pointed out some time back that Piana used to call them that too, and they didn't understand why. Well, Piana was only a couple years older than me. That's why. Different generation. This is what we called them, I think. I think it was pretty common back then. But the point is, and we'll get over to the upper back part in a minute, if we're doing the pressing that we need to do, especially if we're doing pressing that addresses front delts, particularly for benching, and again, I've talked more and more about different variations of presses we can do to build our front delts, there's going to be some splash over to the side delts. People will argue that it may not be enough to cause a real growth stimulus, but when we start talking about the cumulative effects from all the other work, it can be. We do know that rowing can. Rowing can hit the delts hard enough, particularly as we get a little wider grip or at slightly higher angles, to where we're going to get some side delt growth. All right, we're going to get that. And when it comes down to just overall shoulder health, inflammation, things like that, I think that unless we need to be overhead athletes or you're very young with very, very good joints, we don't need to do a lot of resistance work to where our hand passes above our shoulder. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary for maximum growth. Now, I do these days lots of dead hangs. I personally do a lot of dead hangs. But that's different. I'm doing that for shoulder health purposes completely. Mobility, as far as stretching certain ligaments in my shoulders, and it's a phenomenal grip builder. So I like it for a lot of reasons. But when it comes to just the shoulder development, I don't think that it's necessary for us to do these things. And we may have in the long term better shoulder health if we don't. So the rear delt work though, look at all the data you have on rear delts. Look at all the stuff you have on rear delt flies. They hit the side delt super hard. The side delt is getting direct, high quality stimulus from any sort of rear delt fly. And again, I gave you guys 4 different easy examples of basically the same exercise so that we have variation there. And if you get enough volume with that in and with rowing, especially if you're already doing any extra delt work you need to do for your front delts, purely from your presses and other stuff, I think your side delts are very well covered. And I don't think you're going to see much extra growth from going beyond that. But if you wanted to, you could throw some stuff in. I just don't think it's necessary. So the rear delt exercise is covered. So then let's come over and let's talk about rowing. You guys know my take on rowing, that rowing is generally going to be better then pull-ups, chin-ups, pull-downs for overall back development, right? Vertical pulling versus horizontal pulling. Vertical pulling, people will say, well, better for your lats. I think it's arguable. I don't think the data fully supports that. We can make a case for it. And if you need a vastly different angle, if your lats are really lagging, okay, by all means, do some vertical stuff. Is it better, much better for biceps? Yes. Right? Vertical pulling is primary bicep exercises also. Again, evidence for that is overwhelming at this point. You're trying to argue against that, you're going to look stupid biomechanically. EMG hypertrophy studies, they're just as good as curls. But curls work just as good also. So I think the case could be made that if biceps are your concern, you could just do curls and stick with rowing. But rowing, what do we mean by rows? Any sort of row. Pendlay row, bent over row. I don't like Yates rows. I think they're a bicep risk. Because again, it's come back over the whole bicep point. You could do curls. And if you're trying to turn your back exercises into a bicep movement, why don't you just do vertical pulling? I mean, we can make the case for that. I think it's wise. Snatch grip rows. Right. Inverted rows. And inverted rows can be done with tons of our different bars. We can do them closer grip. We can do them really wide grip. It's like all the other stuff. Seal rows. Dumbbell rows. Chest supported rows. Whether it's dumbbell, chest supported, seal rows with a bar, chest supported machines, rowing. Because if we're not worried about the lower back aspect, we can count all those others for middle and upper. But what is it that we get here? Is that we get a synergy. If we're doing almost entirely rowing for our lats, and then we're doing rear delt exercises for the rear delts and that will hit our side delts and stuff, we're getting an enormous amount of focus in the whole upper back area between these things, because rowing hits the upper back much harder than vertical pulling. So we're talking about mid traps, upper traps, posterior deltoids, rhomboids, infraspinatus, teres minor, right? All these things. Right? These are significant, and we need the upper back development. We could argue about it for looking jacked, right? That's a big component. But from a performance perspective, we start looking at what we get for our bench press. Okay, create stability on the bench. It can improve your bench quite a bit. It helps you get a better, tighter bar path. How about squats? It can change your leverages positively on the squat. Okay, because of bar placement, because of that meat back there. It creates a more stable squat with a potentially better bar position. Deadlifts. And we know it's going to contribute some to the deadlift, at least is a very, very important stabilizer to keep the correct bar path. That upper back is very important. And there's a reason when you see someone with a big upper back that you know that they're strong, right? Every person you know who is brutally strong has a jacked upper back. Very few exceptions. There's an occasional odd man out. So when you see that, you know that that's the power look. When those rear delts and traps and the entire trap, top to bottom, is big, combined with lats and things, you know that that person is strong. That is the power look. And we get that from doing these. And again, they do make you stronger. It's not just a look. And I think this combination works really, really well because we're taking both our back and our shoulder exercises and making sure that we double down on that upper back. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.